Well, let's talk about lukewarm. I want to tell you three ways you can know whether or not that's a problem and what we need to do about it. Everybody knows lukewarm is bad, but Jesus said lukewarm is also nauseating. So let's take it seriously when he says that it provokes in him such a reaction that he'll actually spew us out of his mouth if we're lukewarm. And if we find that we are, well, we got some repenting to do. So let's dive in here and look at what he said to the church at Laodicea. You know, we're in the last segment of our series on the Lord's letters to the different churches in Asia that he had John write in the Revelation. This is the last one. It's pretty heavy, too, really. The heaviest of all of them, to my thinking. You hear a lot about lukewarm churches, lukewarm people, and I think there are some misconceptions about what that word means that we ought to clear up, especially about the issue of hot and cold. So let's take some time to examine ourselves, as Paul said, 2 Corinthians 13:5, check ourselves out. That's a good way to avoid problems, right? Examine yourself. It's a good way to avoid either having to go to the doctor or letting an illness take its course and get you in some real trouble. You examine yourself, weigh yourself, take your own blood pressure, watch yourself, you know. Good way to avoid bankruptcy, examine your finances, keep a watch on your budget, examine that. Good way to preserve your relationships. Keep a close tabs on how you're dealing with people and, you know, how that investment of friendship is going. If people examine themselves more, I really think that a lot of the nonsense we deal with in life we wouldn't have to deal with. You don't want to overdo it. You know, that old saying, the unexamined life is not worth living. I think that can turn into a lot of navel gazing where I'm just forever learning about myself and coming to know more about myself. And, you know, there's a lot about myself I just as soon not know. But I need to know this vessel well enough to know, okay, am I operating the way I should be operating? Is anything hindering my relationship with God, my ability to be what I'm supposed to be? So with that in mind, let's look at the Lord's letter to the Laodiceans. Revelation 3, verse 14. Jesus says to John, unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write. Now, you know, when he's talking about writing unto the angel of the church, he's almost certainly talking about writing to the bishop of the church, or what we would call the pastor, elder. Laodicea, it's mentioned in Colossians a few times in a pretty positive manner. Paul briefly refers to the believers in Laodicea. Certainly doesn't mention any particular problems with them. Laodicea was, among other things, a very wealthy area, a very prosperous area. They had a thriving export business. And so these were wealthy believers. Nothing wrong with that. But as we're going to see, you can mistake physical wealth for the wealth that matters the most. So in addressing that church, which obviously, I mean, sometime between the time Paul wrote to Colossae to this point, something had happened, something had deteriorated. So he begins, verse 14, these things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. Okay, when someone needs to reiterate their title with you, that's a way of reestablishing authority, right? You ever got that from your parents? You know, I'm still your mother. Or this is your father. I gave you birth. I raised you. I provided for you. Now, listen up. You know, when somebody is reiterating who they are, that's oftentimes a way of saying, let's get things straight. I want to remind you of the nature of our relationship. I am the Amen, the so be it, the ultimate truth. I am the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I'm eternal. I am. It almost reminds me of what God said to Job at the end of the book of Job. Do you know who I am? And do you know who you're challenging here? It's that kind of a positioning statement. I need to reiterate with you who I am. You'll notice as we go on, of all the churches addressed in the book of the Revelation, Laodicea is the only church of whom Jesus had nothing good to say. Zero. Every other church, even ones that had gotten into immorality and heresy and all these other problems, having lost their first love or whatnot, he still had something good to say to all of them, not these guys. He's got nothing good to say to them. So he dives right in, verse 15, I know thy works, and I know that thou art neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. Now, I used to think that when he said, I wish you were cold or hot, that meant if you were cold spiritually, I could deal with you. At least you would know you were, in a bad place. But really, in this sense, he's saying cold and hot, meaning both are good. I wish you were cold, that would be good. I wish you were hot, that would be good. Because if you look at it in context of who he's addressing, it makes a little more sense. Laodicea, it was between a couple of other cities. To the north, you've got Hierapolis. They had natural hot springs, healing hot springs, healing hot water. It's where you'd go to get relaxed, comforted, and, sort of like when you go to take a spa or a steam bath or something along that line. Then to the east, there's Colossae, which had a lot of running springs of cold, pure water that was fresh, invigorating, bracing, gave you good energy. So you've got those two. Now, in the middle, there's Laodicea, which didn't have its own local water source. So they would pipe in water or have water transported in from either Hierapolis or Colossae. And what condition would it be in when it arrived? You guessed it, lukewarm. Because if it comes from Colossae, where the water's nice and bracingly cold, by the time it gets to Laodicea, it's going to be lukewarm. The nice hot water from Hierapolis, well, it's going to cool down. It's going to be lukewarm by the time it gets there. Now, both of these are sources of health benefits, right? The cold water, which invigorates, the hot water, which heals and comforts. So what he's basically saying here is, you're not fulfilling your function to me or to other people. I come to you and I taste you, and I am not refreshed. I don't get the cold water refreshing, invigorating that I ought to get when I taste you. And you're not a healing influence, You're not a comfort and a healing tool in my hands to other people. And you also don't refresh and invigorate either me or other people. You're not functioning properly. I wish that you were one or the other. And because you're neither, because you're lukewarm, which is basically good for nothing, you're neither cold nor hot, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. I'm going to vomit. Literally, the word spew, New Testament Greek, is like, that's it. I'm going to vomit. When someone vomits, what happens is they've taken in something. I know sometimes you can induce vomiting, but usually vomiting is an involuntary reaction, isn't it? You've taken something in and just, and it, boom, out it comes. That's what he's saying here. It's a sickening reaction. Now, what I've got to ask myself then is, okay, in light of this, what kind of temperature am I? Am I cold and invigorating? Do I refresh people? Do I energize them? Do I encourage them? Do I have that kind of energy that goes along with my life? And or am I comforting? Am I a healing agent? Does somebody feel safe enough with me to feel soothed as hot water would soothe people? Or do I have a healing component to me that I'm actually used by God to restore in people's lives? Am I a healing agent or an invigorating agent? Because if I'm not either one, boy, something's terribly wrong with me. There's also the problem of what the Laodiceans seemed to have become, and it fit their name. Laodicea means essentially governed of the people, influenced by the people. Now, that all sounds very democratic, I know, but that's really not a good thing for a church, because what that basically means is it's a church in which the people say, this is what we want. Well, hey, that's not the way the kingdom works, is it? If a church is saying this is what we want, then the leadership of the church is going to be thinking, okay, I need to give the people what will make them happy. Now, seriously, one of the worst errors I think that came into the church over the last couple of decades is the whole error, this notion that our primary job is to be so seeker-friendly or user-friendly that we're basically giving people what they want. Now, does it matter whether or not we're giving people what they want? Of course it does. Good grief. I mean, as much as possible, we want to be making the worship experience comfortable and good. We want to do things with excellence, and to whatever extent we can give people what they want without compromising truth, well, okay, I think we ought to be doing that. But when that becomes the deciding factor, what do people want and how do we give it to them? Oh, man, no. That is a sign of real lukewarmness there, because it means your priority is to keep people happy. You keep people happy to make yourself comfortable. That's pretty serious when you think about it. You're telling people what they want to hear. You're giving people what they want, whether it's true or not, whether it's doctrinal or not, whether it's what they really need or not, it's what they want. You're giving them that to make them happy, to make yourself more comfortable. Because, of course, when I'm making everybody happy, well, I guess life seems easier for me, right? I mean, that means that I'm no longer as concerned about what is factually true, what is morally right. I'm more concerned with what will keep me in good graces. That seems to be one of the evidential signs of lukewarmness. You're basically giving people what they want. I know when I was in ministry full time, way back when, as a very young man, I started off just with the idea of, oh Lord, let me serve you, let me serve you, let me teach your word, let me give out your word, let me give out the truth, and that was great. And as that happened, people would start responding to me. And for the first time in my life, I felt respected. Wow, people are responding well to me. Hey, people like me. Hey, I like this. Now, whereas at first it was just, Lord, let me serve people well to please you. Now it was, ooh, they're happy. Well, how am I going to keep them that way? And that's what people pleasing is all about. Basically, when you seek to please God, you serve people. When you seek to please people, you serve yourself. When you seek to please God, you're going to serve people, because as Jesus said to Peter, you love me? Okay, then feed my sheep. You want to serve if you love God. The more you love God, the more you will love people. And the more you genuinely love people, the more you will want to respond to them according to what they need. Absolutely. But then when it goes from this to this, like, oh, well, now that I'm serving you all like me. And I feel good about that. And this is where, I hate to say, some leaders get too comfortable with the fact that, okay, now we've got people coming and the funds are coming in and the numbers are up and everything's good. How do we keep them happy? How do we keep them? And when that becomes the primary motivating factor, you're going to be dancing all over the place to make everybody happy. Well, then you're no longer seeking to please God. You're seeking to please people. And in doing that, you're basically serving yourself. That's one way of knowing you're going lukewarm. If basically your priority is to keep everybody around you happy, more than your priority being to serve them by giving them what they really need. What they really need is what you keep in mind when you say, as Paul said to the Galatians, now my little children of whom I labor until Christ be formed in you. I mean, if we love people, if we're serving God, we love people with the idea that, hey, I want what is going to enhance your relationship with him. Now, I would say the lion's share of the time, that will mean showing kindness and respect and gentleness and affection. And of course, that's true. But if we are really wanting to please God, we will be giving people what they need, the truth, the doctrinally sound truth that they need, and the genuine love that they need, which will include honesty and exhortation and compassion and listening and all of that combined, all in the interest of them getting what they really need, rather than just giving people what they want and telling people what they want to hear. So he's saying, you're lukewarm. And one of the reasons you're lukewarm is you're really into making everybody happy. What happens as a result? You achieve the wrong status quo. You basically get comfortable with the wrong status quo, and you think that everything is good because everything is smooth. That seems to be where they were at when he said in verse 17, because you say, and he's about to do the contrast thing, you say this, but in fact, the truth is this. You say, I'm rich, which they were, but this is a very rich area. Because you say I am rich, and I am increased with goods, that's true also, and I have need of nothing. No, not true, not true. I'm rich, okay, yeah, and I am increased with goods, that was true, and nothing wrong with either one of them. I mean, if a woman is rich, if a man is rich, God has blessed them with that, more power to him, that's wonderful. But you never want to assume that that is the top priority, because it is not. It's not. That wealth is something to be stewarded, not to be seen as the highest goal and the highest priority. And he's saying, because you say I'm rich, I'm increased with goods, I have need of nothing, you don't know your real state. You don't know that, in fact, you're wretched. You're not rich. You're poor, and you're miserable, and blind, poor, and naked. I mean, you're not even seeing yourself anymore as I see you. You sought me once, as evidently this church did. And as you were blessed and as you grew, your focus went from me to what is around you, the approval of the people around you and all that you were amassing as a wealthy woman, as a wealthy man. And as a result, you got your priorities so mixed up that you thought material things made you truly wealthy, when in fact you're wretched and you're naked. If your spiritual status is largely out of alignment with God's will, then no, you're not rich, you're not self-sufficient, you're not even dressed. You're naked and you're blind. Of course, you're not seeing things clearly. Interesting how he is probably using their own words against them when he says, you say I am rich and I have need of nothing. Ray Vanderland, one of the commentators I was looking at getting this ready, he pointed out that Laodicea was destroyed by an earthquake, or pretty much decimated by an earthquake around AD 60. Okay, so the Roman government goes to them and says, like, hey, we're the federal government, we'll help you out, we'll pay for restoration of your city, we'll help you to rebuild, we'll give you a grant, whatever. Laodicea, because they were wealthy, contacted the Roman government, and in a letter they said, you guessed it, we are rich, we have material goods, we have need of nothing, thank you very much. Now Jesus is saying, you say that to yourself, and perhaps materially it's true, but in the eternal sense it is not. And so because of that, verse 18, I counsel you to buy of me gold that's been tried with fire, and that in doing so you might be rich, truly rich, and white raiment, so that you may be clothed. What you need from me, you do not have. What you have is good, but it's not what you need in the light of eternity. From the eternal perspective, you need truth from me that's been tried in gold. You need to lay up treasures in heaven, and you need to be clothed that you be not naked, and the shame of your nakedness does not appear. And you need to anoint your eyes with eye salve that you might really be able to see. You've become blind to the basics. You need true riches, and you don't realize you don't have them. You've got material riches. You think that's it. You're not laying up true riches. As Jesus said, you love sacrificially, you give sacrificially, you live a disciple's life, you live an obedient life, and in doing so, you lay up treasures in heaven. You guys aren't doing that anymore. You're just going through motions. You need white raiment. That is, you need to be clothed by me. Why? Because you think you're so self-sufficient that you're good enough for me as you are, and you're not. And I see that, and it's like, man, the emperor does not only have no clothes, the emperor is naked, the emperor is also just darn ugly. You don't know how wretched you really look. Then he says, anoint your eyes with eye salve. Now, again, in context, that's going to be very pertinent to them. Laodicea had a school of medicine there where they manufactured a powder that was ground into eye salve, which they exported and which was very popular and a good means of income. So they knew all about eye salve. So when he says to them, you guys are good at making the eye salve, you know what? You need some of that stuff. Just like you've got a lot of riches, but you need the true riches. You got a lot of eye salve that you yourselves get rich on. You need the real thing. You need me to open your eyes because you have become spiritually blind. And that leads to a critical point. It really seems these people were guilty of an error that a lot of people I think today are guilty of. I've been guilty of it myself at times. And that is when you know more about him than you know of him. When you know more about him than you know of him. I know a lot about Abraham Lincoln. I do not know Abraham Lincoln. I need to know not only about Jesus, I need to study his life, of course, but I need to know him. I mean, I need to be growing in my knowledge of him. Like Paul said, that's my major aspiration, that I may know him in the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering. I need to be intimate with him. It needs to be ongoing. The Christian life, it's so many things. I get that. But primarily, it's about relationship. Because Jesus said it's about you and me. Jesus says to the individual, know me. Then he says, follow me. He says, abide in me. Commune with me. One-on-one. Your knowledge of me should be growing, and the intimacy between us should be growing. Know me. Too often people know more about him than they know of him, and as a result, they're neither hot nor cold. because, well, they've been removed from the source. Think about that for a minute, okay? When something was hot and it's no longer hot, what happened? It got removed from the source. For something to stay hot, it has to be on the source that's heating it. For something to stay cold, it's got to be attached to the source or on the source that's keeping it cold, right? Things don't naturally stay hot and they don't naturally stay cold. Where do they naturally go? Lukewarm. Yeah, I mean, it's the natural default is to become lukewarm. When something doesn't stay hooked into the source, it loses its heat and it loses its invigorating cold. Serious problem, he's saying to this church. You are no longer locked into the source. You're not abiding in me. Thereby, you have lost your real coldness, which you should have, and you've lost the heat, which you should have. And so he says, I've got to correct you here. Now, here's where it becomes hopeful, okay? Although he has nothing good to say about this church, he has some very good things to say to this church, and now he says them. Verse 19, as many as I love, I rebuke and I chasten, okay? I'm only correcting you because you matter so much to me. As many as I love, I rebuke and I chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. Nobody in their right minds wants to be chastened. It's not a pleasant experience. But according to the author of Hebrews, if you're not chastened by God, God's not your father. I mean, the wording there is very specific. You're illegitimate if God is not chastening you. I don't like being chastened by God, but I like being reminded when I'm chastened, hey, that's proof of ownership. Because fathers chasten their own, okay? I'm out shopping or, at a public event, and I got to tell you, I see kids all the time that need chastening, but I'm not their dad. I'm not going to do it. They're not mine. When I had kids who were kids, I have two grown sons now, but when they were kids, part of my role was chastening. Why? Because they were mine. That was my responsibility. But I wouldn't chasten somebody else's kid. So no, chastening, that's a part of the loving relationship. It's proof of ownership. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You'll notice he is speaking to the church from outside the church. Verse 20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. That's not a compliment. That means he's saying to the church, hi, I'm outside and I would like to come in. That's chilling. I would hate as a church to ever think Jesus was on the outside saying, hello, may I please come in? I mean, he's so amazing, I love my big old bulldog, who is such a sweetheart and is so gentle, especially with little kids. He's just like, he's very tender, he's very deferential, and he wouldn't knock one over for love or money, even if the kid is getting a little rough with him, he's like very patient and just, love, Jesus, the Lion of Judah. I mean, he's gentle, knocking on the door of the church. Hey, that's not going to last forever. He's going to come steamrolling when he finally comes in all of his glory. It's not going to be a knock. Okay, it's going to be thunder. It's going to be right. Hey, I'm here, ready or not. But right now he's knocking. And he's saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man will hear my voice and open the door, I'll come into him and I will sup with him. I will commune with him. I will dine with him and he with me. So what's he saying? I want communion, not just profession. I want communion. I want to be known. I want you to know me. I want us to have that kind of a closeness. No. I mean, that's basically one of the ways we avoid lukewarmness is we stay plugged into the source. The communion with him is ongoing. And he promises in verse 21, to him who overcomes, I will grant that he will sit with me on my throne, even as I also overcame and am set down with my Father on his throne. Now, part of, again, keeping from being lukewarm, abiding in him, we identify with him. As we know him, we identify with his resurrection, with the authority that he takes, with the overcoming power still evident in our lives, which should be evident there. It really should. And finally, he ends it with verse 22, he that has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says. Let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Now, by saying he that has an ear to hear, he is making a clear qualification, isn't he? He's saying, I know darn well not everybody is going to hear this. That's why I always say, if somebody is rejecting your message, that alone is not evidence that you gave the wrong message or that you gave it in the wrong way. I mean, we can always improve our delivery, right? But the fact is, if somebody is rejecting what you are saying, that in and of itself doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Jesus himself is saying, I know not everybody is going to hear, but he who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. I am knocking on the door. I do not want you to stay in a lukewarm state, because if you do, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. I'm going to vomit you out. It's not going to happen between us. But I want you to stay locked into the source. I want you to make pleasing me the priority, not pleasing people. I want you to keep the basics straight. I want the communion to be intact. And you know what? It looks like this church heard him. Now, I find this hopeful. I got to admit, I'm quick to give up on things. I shouldn't be, but I am. And I think oftentimes we're quick to give up on the country. Oh, America, it's such a mess. Well, yes, it is, by the way. I mean, you got me there. And in a lot of ways, the modern church, well, not the whole church, but I think much of the church is not where it needs to be. I think you'd agree with that. But that doesn't mean all is lost. Here he's telling these people that the church that he had nothing good to say about, out of all the churches in the Revelation that he addressed, here's the one he has no good words for. Looks like they responded. Looks like when he knocked, they heard him. And they answered. By AD 161, one of the bishops at Laodicea had been martyred. Hey, that doesn't happen when you're lukewarm, you know. AD 363, a very important church council was held there. Evidently, they became a thriving church and took seriously what he had admonished them. And hey, that's exactly where you and I want to be. Few important points on that then. If we're going to accept the fact that going lukewarm is the natural default, and I'm afraid it is, okay, we don't automatically default to spirituality, do we? If you're not investing in your spiritual life, it ain't going to happen. I mean, if you're not in the Word, if you don't have a prayer life, you don't have fellowship, you don't have the kind of interactions you need within the body, you're going to go lukewarm. It's the natural direction all of us will go. Few things I got to keep in mind. Then I need to ask for the true riches. Like he said, ask me for true riches that have been tried in gold, the truth tried in fire, truth about God, truth about myself. I want to go for the true riches. Ask. Because I need that. Half the time I don't even know what the true riches are. So I have to ask him, Lord, show me today, what do I need to do to lay up true riches for myself? What truth do I need to know? What do I need to correct? Then recognize the need to be clothed in raiment. I need to be clothed in his righteousness, okay? I must never reach the point, neither must you, where we feel as though we are presenting ourselves to God because we have just tried harder. It's a great fallacy. It's a lot easier to think, okay, I have prayed properly, I've been living properly, I've been doing a pretty good job. Now I feel bolder before God. That kind of brings up a false idea of what makes us bold before God. Of course, we want to strive for obedience, absolutely, but that's not what makes us fit to be in his presence. So I need to recognize my need. I need to recognize I am a sinner, not just I was a sinner, but I have sin in my life. It remains there. There is sin in the environment as well. It entices me. And until Christ comes or I die, that's going to be the reality. I need to be recognizing my need to be clothed in his righteousness and to trust in that. And to allow that, of course, to continue making me more righteous, I should say, but never totally righteous in this life. And then finally, examine. You ask, you recognize, you examine. You examine yourself as a lifestyle, really. Now, self-examination is not self-absorption. It's not self-obsession. It's just a recognition that, Lord, I must remain aware of whatever grieves you, whatever limitations I am giving into, whatever sinful tendencies I'm giving into. I need to examine my motives. I need to re-examine so that I have that ongoing cleansing work of your Spirit going on in me. Because honestly, you know this as well as I do. No one stays very healthy without regular self-examination. Next week, I want to talk to you about a question I get all the time. And that is, because of the kind of work I do, it involves a lot of people who are wanting to overcome homosexuality or who deal with homosexuality. I'm often asked, do gays need deliverance? Is it demonic? Is it an unclean spirit? Is that what needs to happen? Do gays need deliverance? I want to talk about that question next week and answer it as thoroughly and biblically as I can. Meanwhile, hey, if you like this content, please do like our Facebook page and let me know you're there. I'd love to hear from you. Any questions you've got, feel free in the comments section to send them in. Also, if you want to support this work, Cloudfire Ministries, so we can go on providing free content, just go to joedallas.com/giving, joedallas.com/giving. That's how you can partner with us in this. Well, we're here with you every Wednesday, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Hey, keep in mind a couple of questions I like to keep referring to. Saul of Tarsus said, Lord, what would you have me to do? Well, Paul the Apostle answered his own question later in Romans when he said, what saith the Scripture? Good questions. Let's keep asking them. Really good seeing you. God bless.